Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our Tropical Weather Outlook video for today, Saturday, July 26th, 2025. Let's start off with the National Hurricane Center homepage, and let's start off in the Eastern Pacific today because there's a lot of activity going on there. There's absolutely nothing in the Atlantic right now. In fact, I'm probably not even going to show you the tropical weather bulletin because it is quiet, at least for the next foreseeable future. But in the Eastern Pacific, there is quite a bit of activity going on. Things beginning to uptick here. And maybe in the future, it's still unsure though, but maybe, just maybe, we might see things still uptick as we head into the month of August in the Atlantic. But for now, activity is definitely seeing an uptick in the East Pac. We have three area of interests right now. One near the coast of Mexico. This is maybe going to develop. This has a 40% chance of development in the next 7 days. And this is probably going to move west-northwestward off the coast of Mexico. Not sure about any impacts to the Mexican coastline for now, but I'll show you the models in a little bit. And obviously we'll see over the coming days whether or not this actually does mean any potential impacts to Mexico. But for now, just watching an area of interest that might develop here very soon. And then we have another area of interest here in the Central Pacific. This actually has an invest called 90C. This is not actually in the Eastern Pacific area of interest because this is west of 140 degrees latitude, latitude or longitude. Latitude is up and down, longitude is east to west. This is west of 140 degrees west. So because of that, it's in the Central Pacific area of concern. So this is designated Invest 90C for Central Pacific, and this has a 60% chance of development within the next 7 days, medium 50% chance within the next 48 hours, and this might potentially become a tropical system here in the Central Pacific, although any impacts to Hawaii probably will be slim to none. And then we have another area of interest here in the Eastern Pacific, getting towards the Central Pacific, but this is probably not going to develop, so not really concerned about that. Here's a satellite image of the Central Pacific right now, or the Pacific in general, and you could actually see the Central Pacific here. And you can see there's actually quite a bit of stuff going on here closer towards the Central Pacific. Lots of convective activity associated with the ITCZ here in the Pacific, and you could actually see quite a few areas where there is decent amount of turning and vorticity here. Probably some sort of mid-level center at least near 130 degrees west here, but I don't think this is the invest that the National Hurricane Center is tracking. But bottom line, there's definitely a lot of energy in the Pacific right now, a lot of convective activity. You can even see here off the coast of Mexico, this is probably the area we're watching over the next several days that'll develop here just off the coast of Mexico. And we'll see once again if that does bring any direct impacts to the Mexican coastline. But at least right now, the Eastern Pacific is quite active. And on the other hand, in the Atlantic, not much going on right now. Here's a satellite image of the general open Atlantic. You can see we have typical Saharan air moving off the coast of Africa. Still a big factor for the hurricane season right now. It's not really till the middle to latter portion of the next month when the Saharan air truly lets up and we start seeing a lot of activity here in the Eastern Atlantic. And I'll show you why I'm mentioning that in a little bit, because I mentioned yesterday that models were showing the potential for something to try to get going in the next week or so in the Western MDR, heading westward in the Atlantic, but it seems like models are starting to back away from it. And obviously the number one factor probably is drier conditions still across the Eastern Atlantic right now, probably being caused by Saharan air. And I could actually show you what the Saharan air looks like right now. Still a lot of it out there, letting up a little bit here in the Western MDR. So maybe we'll see if something still tries to develop here in the next week or so as we start to head into the month of August. But lots of Saharan air out there still. Although I will say The worst of the Saharan air is starting to lift northward, especially these very bright colors here on the map that represents a higher density and dustiness of the Saharan air in the atmosphere. And that's starting to lift northward. So we're starting to see things lighten up a little bit, but it's still a lot and enough that is kind of keeping a lid on things in the eastern Atlantic. So for the foreseeable future, once again, not much happening in the Atlantic, especially in the deep tropics, and then obviously we have some of the Saharan air making its way into the western Atlantic. Interestingly, some of it actually made it to the southern United States, including Florida, so maybe you can see it from there. That should be interesting when it comes to weather conditions in the skyline, especially with the sunrise and the sunset. I know that Saharan air does have an effect on that, so that should be interesting, but nothing happening in the Atlantic right now that is of interest and of note. And I'll show you the precipitable water as well. And you could see lots of dry air, especially on the precipitable water. You could definitely see the dry air that is in the eastern Atlantic still. But you could also see the hints of where we have our tropical waves, especially in the western Atlantic here. Definitely a beefy tropical wave moving into the islands right now. In fact, I'll bring you back to the satellite here. You could definitely see some convective activity, probably lots of showers and thunderstorms bringing gusty winds to the islands right now. And that still happens regardless of whether or not we have tropical cyclones to develop. We still get the tropical waves that move across the MDR and then move into the islands and bring gusty conditions and obviously nuisance weather that, we would probably get in tropical systems. But, the only difference is that we don't have anything that is actually fully developed right now. And then also here over Texas and the southern United States and the western Gulf, there's also a lot of moisture right now there too. That's associated with the area of interest we had here in the Gulf yesterday and throughout the week, which was a reincarnation pretty much of 93L, but obviously that wasn't able to develop either and get its act going. So now it's just bringing lots of moisture to the southern United States and the western Gulf. And honestly, right now, Texas really doesn't need it, especially after the last few weeks of what they had, especially earlier on in the month. So hopefully they're not going to deal with a lot of extensive flooding, but definitely going to see heavy rain there. And probably seeing a lot of it right now. And finally, sea surface temperature anomalies before I get to the models. Things are nice and warm right now, so whenever we do get development, just wanted to point out to you, things are nice and warm, especially here in the MDR, and I've been mentioning quite a bit, especially since May. I've been saying the MDR was going to warm up. It's going to, a lot of people were kind of downcasting and being doubtful of the hurricane season, especially because the MDR was cooler back in May, but now we're in late July. Things have definitely warmed up quite a bit. And they're probably only going to get warmer from here on out as we head into the peak of the hurricane season. And not just the MDR, but the Caribbean, the Gulf too is especially warm. Even off the southeast is especially warm. And even here off the northwestern coast of Africa near the Canary Current, that is warm as well. So it's all around warm in the Atlantic and cooler in the Pacific. Not a bad signal at all for this hurricane season. And now especially as we head into the peak, we are literally in the last few days of July, and next week begins the month of August. So I am definitely interested to see in what kind of activity this is going to resort in, especially as we start getting towards the peak. But I will show you the models, at least the 12Z GFS for now. Just really quickly going to take you out over the next 7 days. Nothing significant expected. Obviously, we do have this wave here, which you could very clearly see that does come off the coast of Africa. Definitely has a decent vorticity signature with it. And this was the wave that yesterday I showed you the GFS was developing and making it a small, brief tropical system as it went into the islands. But obviously, on today's model run, no longer showing that. Probably because it's now picking up on much less favorable conditions out in the eastern Atlantic. Obviously, still the dry air and stable conditions that we typically see early on in the season. So looks like we might not get a lot of development out of this, at least in the MDR. But you never know, especially beyond 7 days, if this energy ends up somewhere here in the Western Atlantic, maybe off the southeast coast or maybe in the Gulf, that it might try to develop then. You never know. We'll see. And we've had a lot of that over the last several years, especially with these in close, very quick developing storms. Some of them even become memorable major hurricane landfalls like Helene last year, Ida in 2021. So the bottom line is you really cannot completely write stuff off, even if they don't develop out here in the MDR, especially right now since it's still August and or it's still late July, and even as it's at hour 168 here, and that's August 2nd, where we are getting into August, but early August still not that different from late July. We still are kind of somewhat in the early season, so things are not as favorable as they can be out in the eastern Atlantic yet. So obviously not surprised that the model really not showing much in the way of development anymore for this system. But again, you never know. And then lastly, before we end off here, just want to show you quickly the Eastern Pacific, and you can definitely see quite a bit of activity going on. 1, 2 systems that try to develop here. It looks like even a third one almost tries to consolidate a little bit. And then obviously we have our system off the coast of Mexico, develops within the next 3 to 4 days, at least that's what the GFS shows, and then probably by the end of next week it already develops and then that kind of moves off. It doesn't impact the Mexican coastline, so at least in terms of impacts to Mexico, despite the fact that it looks like things are upticking in the Eastern Pacific, at least for now, impacts to land are probably slim to none. And obviously that's a good thing, and hopefully it'll remain that way for the foreseeable future. That's going to do it for today's video, though, since there's not really much else to go over besides that. So I'm going to end it off here. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. If you like what you saw, please, as I always say every single video, I like to emphasize it, like, comment, ask any questions in the comment section. I'll be sure to respond. And also subscribe to my channel. It's free. And please subscribe. Help us grow the community, of course. And also share this video with family and friends as well, especially those who you think might find this information interesting and useful. So please go ahead and do that. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will be back with more tomorrow.